Divesting gone wrong. Dorothy Dandridge. The much celebrated quote-unquote black actress met her untimely end due to divesting. There was a saying back then among black women in that they were told they needed to get with white men to advance their careers, yet for Dorothy, her career ended. You notice how black women during Jim Crow and segregation were just willingly shacking up with white men without an issue. Black women divesting happened at the exact same time Jim Crow and segregation were occurring, yet it's spoke about as if they are completely unrelated. Well, Dorothy proves that black women were fighting to be accepted by white men. Let's get started with Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Jean Dandridge was born in 1922 in Cleveland, Ohio. Although it states her dad was black, Dorothy didn't know her father and her mother Ruby. Well, she turned into a same-gender loving woman. Ruby's lover was named Geneva Williams. Williams was said to have had a bad temper and to have cruelly disciplined Dorothy. That's typical of divestors. So Dorothy's black father is questionable. Fast forward, when Dorothy was getting put on by black men, she was the first African-American film star to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, which was for her performance in Carmen Jones. Dandridge also performed as a vocalist in venues such as the Cotton Club and the Apollo Theater. On to her dating life. Dorothy's first marriage was to Harold Nicholas, one half of the famous Nicholas Brothers dance duo. They tied the knot in 1942 but divorced in 1951 after Harold wanted nothing to do with her. Perhaps he realized that she preferred white men and dipped. Dorothy had a relationship with film director Otto Preminger during the late 1950s. They collaborated on the film Carmen Jones in 1954, and their romance continued off-screen. The affair with Otto Preminger that lasted 4 years, during which Preminger advised her on career matters. He demanded that she accept only starring roles after her success in his film. Dandridge later regretted following his advice. Earl Mills, Dorothy's manager, said that Dottie became pregnant with Preminger's child and that Preminger refused to marry her. Mills arranged for Dorothy to get an abort from a prominent Beverly Hills physician. According to Mills, that is what caused the affair between Preminger and Dandridge to come to an end. Dorothy was bitter. The resentment Dorothy had towards Otto was because they could never marry. Preminger would never leave his wife, Mary Gardner, to marry Dandridge because if he did, he would be blackballed in Hollywood for marrying a black woman. Dorothy openly displayed her resentment towards Otto, according to Jerry. "Stop chewing your food. Your teeth clack. You got an ugly old bald head," Dorothy to Otto. Otto was ugly, she writes. Many of those little men who run Hollywood are ugly. Yet she had relations with an ugly bald man for 4 years and got mad he wouldn't leave his wife. Next. Dandridge had a brief fling with actor Peter Lawford in 1959, during the time of her second marriage. There's some overlap. According to Vanity Fair, being a devoted Anglophile, Dandridge was already primed to fall for the actor Peter Lawford when he came to see her show at the New Frontier in Las Vegas in the early 1950s, with fellow stars June Allison and Van Johnson. By night's end, Lawford and Dandridge peeled away from the party and found themselves alone in his car on a lover's lane. Peter put his arms around me and began kissing me in a delightful, gallant English style. "If kissing can have nationality," she writes. "I like being with him." Dandridge was enamored with the sociable Brit. He had a free and easy style of living, talking, and thinking, she recounts, and he had, "He'll want to delete me for this," a touch of Errol Flynn about him. Dandridge found comfort in cooking food from her childhood and invited Lawford into her kitchen sanctuary. One night she was cooking chitlins, one of her favorites, much to Lawford's nauseous disgust. "Honestly," he said, "I can't understand anybody eating it." One evening, when Lawford appeared with Gary Cooper's patrician wife, Rocky, Dandridge decided to perform a little experiment. "I thought, I'll serve them chitlins in a tall-stemmed glass," she writes. "I'll chop them up fine and make them into an hors d'oeuvre. I'll put a little paprika on top, some Tabasco sauce, and parsley on the side. I'll serve chitlins the way they've never been served before. I'll set the whole thing up with pretty little forks and serve it steaming hot." The ruse worked, and Lawford asked for a second helping. The affair soon fizzled, and Dandridge came to feel conned by Lawford and his charming ways. Dandridge had let herself fall hard, knowing Lawford was ambitious and would never marry a black woman. Still, she admits in her book, "If I were honest with myself, I would have to admit that I wanted nothing better than to hear him say, 'Marry me.' So she acted like a wife for this white man who she knew would never marry her." Next white man. Dorothy's second marriage was to Jack Dennison in 1959. Unfortunately, like her first marriage, it ended in divorce in 1962. Dennison was a con artist who wanted to live off her earnings and have her provide financially for his sinking restaurant businesses. He put a good front, but on their wedding night he was broke. Earl Mills, Dottie's manager. When they wed, Dorothy was earning about $250,000 a year. Dennison was persuasive enough to get his wife to make a series of bad decisions. Pouring money into his failed restaurants and even sang regularly at his third-rate club, a move she knew would drastically reduce her standing in the show business world. But she did it anyway. Then, again, heartache entered the picture. When Dandridge's bank account had been milked dry, the marriage ended. Said by Dorothy's best friend Jerry. Friends of Dorothy say that Jack was the most disastrous and destructive element in Dorothy's life. Jack was a smooth-talking man who reportedly jumped at the chance to woo a vulnerable, heartsick woman. In her autobiography, Everything and Nothing, The Dorothy Dandridge Tragedy, she said, "Some people delete themselves with drink, others with over, and some with an object. A few hurl themselves in front of or autos. I hurled myself in front of another white man." During the divorce proceedings, Jack reportedly wanted half of everything she had left and allegedly cut sheets, pillowcases, and other items right down the middle. Dennison was abusive and mishandled her money, with Dandridge losing much of her savings to an investment in her husband's failed restaurant. Amid financial setbacks and allegations of domestic issues, Dandridge discovered that the people who were handling her finances had swindled her out of $150,000, and she owed $139,000 in back taxes. She was forced to sell her Hollywood home and place her daughter in a California state mental institution, Camarillo State Hospital. Dandridge moved into a small apartment on Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood, California. They split in 1962. As her film career and marriage floundered, Dandridge began drinking heavily and taking antidepressants. With the threat of bankruptcy hanging over her, she couldn't pay for the 24-hour medical care of her daughter by 1963. Harlan was placed in a state institution, and with that Dandridge suffered a nervous breakdown. On September 8, 1965, Dandridge was found deleted mysteriously in her Hollywood home aged 42. Some reports say an overdose of antidepressant was to blame. Dandridge had little more than $2 in her bank account at the time of her passing. From Dorothy's own mouth, she knew she couldn't compete with white women. She knew white men were terrible, but she could not control her lust for white men, thus eventually leading to her demise. Her mom was by her side as all these white men lied, kept her as a side piece, and stole money from her. Just remember, divesting is a team sport. Divesting gone wrong.